What's up, bitches? Sean from Version 2 Poker. Gonna go over a hand I played yesterday at 1-2. Kind of an interesting hand, and I've been doing a lot of work with Dan, Benjamin Barker, on trying to analyze our ranges and think about what our range looks like and how we should be playing with it a little bit better. And I'm by no means proficient at it yet, but uh, I think it'll be a good exercise just for me and for anybody watching this video to kind of go through ranges the way I'm going to. So I hope it works out pretty well. Anyway, so six-handed table, 1-2 no limit. Uh, I know I have the screen names and stack sizes covered up, but this hand is between me and the small blind. I'm in the big blind, he's in the small blind, and we start right at just about $200 deep. So just a hair over 100 big blinds deep. Um, okay, so this villain min raises blind versus blind, which is almost certainly a mistake because I'm never folding to his min open, and one of the most profitable things about opening in the small blind is the fact that the big blind just ends up folding really really often, and we pick up 1.5 big blinds every time the big blind folds. So anytime you're giving him incentive to call, you're losing a lot of money there. Anyway, but this villain chooses to min open. It's been a while since I played on this particular site and with this particular villain, so I don't remember if this was his standard size, but I don't think it was. But I decided not to read too much into what that sizing meant, other than to think that it was a bit less likely that he would have, like a super premium, like I don't know, Jacks plus Ace Queen. Uh, but even that I wasn't really relying on. Anyway, I ended up flatting here, and I think that I actually could have 3-bet here given this villain. He's 24-16, a little bit too cally overall. We can see his fold to 3-bet is 30% over 6K hands. So he probably is the type who's going to flat my 3-bet with hands that I do dominate. And at the time, I didn't spend enough time like looking at his fold to 3-bet and his 4-bet here, which is super super low, 2.6. So I think if I had to play this hand again, I probably would 3-bet this hand. This would be a hand in my range that I use as a value 3-bet versus this particular opponent. Um, but flatting is obviously going to be plus EV. I mean, I'm getting absurd odds, and King Jack is a really, really good hand. But I wanted to go over what I think my range is for like flatting a min open here. So I'm getting 3-1 right off the bat. It's only $2 to win 6. I'm going to be in position. He has a theoretically wide range. We don't really know for sure, but probably any reasonable opponent opening from the small blind is going to have a wide range. And just with the pot odds I'm getting, I'm probably going to be flatting with something like 75% of hands, give or take. I mean, maybe I'm folding the bottom of this. Maybe I'm flatting with like 65% of hands, 70% of hands. I don't really know, but I'm flatting really, really wide. Like even these weak offsuit kings, Jack 6 offsuit, I can flat with those because I'm not really looking to play a big pot. And when the pot's already so small, right? When he just min raises, it makes the flop pot really small. It makes the turn pot smaller than normal. It makes the river pot smaller than normal. So it's a lot tougher for him to put pressure on me because I get to close out the action, right? So like unless he decides to check raise on some street, which is unlikely, he's never ever going to be able to put me in a position, or unlikely to put me in a position where I have to play for stacks. So I can play a hand like Queen 5 off, getting such good odds, just to flop one pair and play a pot where only 1.5 bets is going in. So like if I flop a pair of queens, like I don't have to put in 2 bets. I can only put in 1 and fold if he barrels the turn. And he's going to check fold some kind of like middling connected flops pretty often too. So yeah, I think versus the mid open here, as long as we play well post flop, we can flat really, really wide. I think for more inexperienced players, you should be flatting much tighter even to a mid open here, just because they'll end up burning money post flop. But anyway, that's kind of irrelevant because I have King Jack off, which is obviously a really, really awesome hand, especially for min raise. So I flat, and he calls. Or excuse me, I flat, and the flop comes out King 6-3 Rainbow, which obviously a pretty good flop for us. But I wanted to see how like in my head in this hand, like King Jack was like that's near the top of my range. So if I pull up Flopzilla here and I say that I flat with, this is close enough, 72% of all hands. You notice that Flopzilla changes this range slightly compared to what Poker Tracker considers the top 73% of hands, but not a big deal. And let's see, so the flop is King of Clubs, 6 of Hearts, 3 of Spades. And we're going to press tab for combo mode. So anyway, total number of combos, 854. Total number of combos that are top pair plus, let's go ahead and click our filter, is 155. So let's do that math real quick. So we'll say 155 combos divided by 854. So this is any top pair plus. So this includes King 2 off. So 18% of our range flops top pair or better on this flop. But I wanted to look at how King Jack ranks just total in my range and see like how close to the top of my range it is. Because the point being is I end up choosing to raise here. He c-bets 2/3 pot and I end up raising. And my reason for raising was that I felt like King Jack was one of the strongest hands in my range. So let's change this range up a little bit because I'm going to be 3-betting these hands. I probably would have 3-bet the King Queens for value. So King Jack is my best top pair hand. I have no overpairs, and I only have 26 combos of hands better than top pair. So since King Jack is my best hand, or my best top pair hand, we have 122 combos now of top pair or better. And King Jack is going to represent 12 combos. We can see, if you look over here, 9 combos of King Jack off and 3 combos of King Jack suited once we know that there's a King of Clubs there. So King Jack would represent 12 combos plus the 26, which is going to be 38 combos. So we do 38 versus a total of 777 combos divided by 777. So King Jack off on this board, assuming that I 3-bet the range that I 3-bet in flat, or range, assuming that I 3-bet the range that I say I 3-bet here, and that I flat the entire rest of this range, King Jack off is in the top 5% of all hands that, here, I'll just show it in percentage, that I'll see this flop with. So it's pretty reasonable to use the top 5% of your hands as a value raising range. Now, that doesn't really consider the fact that potentially I just want to have no raising range here. But I did think that this particular villain, given his overall stats, 24-16, with this is kind of like whitish gap between VPIP and PFR, and his fold to 3-bet that was really, really low of 30%. I felt like his overall player type was one that was going to defend versus my flop raise very, very wide. Just because the board's dry, he's just going to be a non-believer. He's just going to look at this board, and when he has pocket 7, he's just going to call. He might 3-bet bluff me when he has ace-queen. If he has any king that I beat, he's going to call. So I felt like in game I felt like it was a pretty good spot to raise, and I felt like it was the top of my value range, and turns out it's pretty near the top of my value range. So I'm happy with the raise. And he calls, and turn is the 8 of clubs, and he checks, which we expect him to do. And then the question is like, okay, now that I've raised, should I be value betting the turn? And what's my plan on rivers if I get called? And what's my plan if he check raises the turn? So one thing I would want to say is that it's really unlikely he check raises the turn. But first, let's say that he just check calls, which is him check folding the turn or check calling is much more reasonable. So I think that if he just has a pure float, which occasionally he might have, he might just think I'm totally full of shit and float me with the ace queen and call the flop, like hoping that I end up, checking back the turn, and then he fires the river for half pot and then I fold, which is not a super unreasonable line, but it's a little optimistic. So, but he's probably also just going to end up check folding. So if he does have a float, probably check folds those on the turn. It's definitely a decent chance that when he has a hand like 5-6 suited, a6 suited, pocket 7s, pocket 9s, there's a decent chance he folds those on the turn. And there's even some remote chance he'll fold some weak kings on the turn, but I think that's unlikely. So those are the types of hands he'll fold. He'll fold almost all of his air, fold a decent chunk of his middling hands, and then even occasionally fold a top pair type hand, and certainly never fold a a set or two pair hand. We expect to get action from those for sure. Um, so when he does check call me, it's his range is a lot of king X's, hands like 6x or 3x that turn to flush draw to go with him. So like ace 3 of clubs, ace 6 of clubs, 5 6 of clubs. Those hands won't fold. And then his hands, like his king X's that we beat, and then also his hands that beat us, right? So his aces, his ace king, his king sixes, his king eights, his pocket sixes, things like that. Like so his really nutted range, his two pair or his ace king plus range. Let's say that's his nutted range. So any like hand like ace king plus, I would expect to check call again as well, because he expects me to be really really polarized here. I don't think he expects me to be raising a hand like king jack or king 10 on this flop. So if he has a hand like ace king, his his likely play versus a turn barrel is not going to be to like check raise and try to stack king 10. It's going to be to check call and then see what I do on the river and possibly bluff catch the river. Um, so yeah, so anyway, so I decided to bet the turn, and then I was wondering what he would do with his like king fives and pocket jacks on the river, and I decided that if I bet the turn, his most likely plan was to fold to a river barrel, and that if I bet the river, I'd be over repping my hand, that I would be playing my hand too much like it was a set, and it'd be too hard to get value. So like if I did get called, it would be by his king eights and his king sixes and his pocket threes and aces, and not by his like king fives, king sevens, which is the type of hands I really need to get called by to make my value bet plus EV. Uh, so so I do bet the turn though, and I go with a bit over half pot, between half and 2/3 pot, which I think is a reasonable size. And he very very quickly check raises, and he check raises really big, like like an absurd size. And what this does with his stack size leaves him with $80 behind, um, which is a committing raise, but it's very strange. Like it's really weird that he would play any hand. One, this sizing I think is poor because it doesn't allow him to be able to fold to a jam, and it also doesn't um, allow him to bluff the river if he's bluffing the turn effectively, because he just won't have enough money to make me fold on a river if I happen to like flat this bet. But when I went through his range, I started to think about how he would play sets and aces and ace king and king. Like king 8 was the only hand that I thought maybe could play this way, but I still was pretty confident that king 8 would call again to let me bluff. Excuse me, to hopefully let me bluff the river. So when I started to think about hands that would play this way, the only hands I could really think about were hands like the 4-5 of clubs, the ace 6 of clubs, ace 3 of clubs, 5 6 of clubs. So hands that improved on the turn, but didn't really want to like call anymore. They just wanted to shove and hope I folded, right? Or raise and hope I folded. Like I think he didn't feel comfortable with the shove sizing because it was too big, but then he went with this massive oversizing, 5x my raise almost. So, and I was really confident that he was just not going to play a really nutted hand this way. Uh, I just thought, and oh, the other part of his range that I thought was somewhat likely was like a pocket sevens that thought I was full of crap on the flops, so floated, but now is like too uncomfortable to just like call and then decide what to do on the river, so it's turning itself into a bluff in kind of like a weird spazzy way. Um, anyway, so I opt to ship it in as opposed to um, flatting just because of his stack size. I think that he has hands that kind of have to call it off now that he's check raised, um, but won't bluff the river if they miss. So he calls, and he does end up showing the 4-5 of clubs. And he got there on the river, which is pretty irrelevant. But yeah, I was pretty happy with the way I played the hand. Was I was not a fan of his play in this hand at all, and I don't think he can really fold the flop or the turn. but I just don't really like. I think mostly I don't like his turn sizing, um, and I think, yeah, I just don't like his turn sizing. I think that his turn check raise is not crazy, but I think that if we go back to the turn here, um, let's look at some math here. I'm kind of thinking through this as I make this video. So let's say, I mean, his draw is so strong. I'm going to assume that he has enough equity to call it off, no matter what size he makes it. Like if he, even if he check min raises and I jam it in here, he's going to have enough equity to call it off, I think. So let's give me a smattering of, let's say I might raise the flop with just like some random flush draws. I know I don't actually have ace queen, but it's kind of irrelevant if I have ace queen or queen jack of clubs here. I just want to give me a couple of flush draws that are better than his 5 high flush draw, but not a ton, because I wouldn't really be raising the flop too often with backdoor flush draws. And then let's say I can get it in with some king jack, king 10, and then we'll just leave it just the king jacks. Let's see, and then I would get it in with pocket sixes, pocket threes, king 6 suited, and king 3 suited, which would probably be, I guess I can get myself 6-8 suited. I might choose to make a 6 a bluff on the flop and then bet call it off on the turn with middle 2 pair. Okay, so this is my range for bet calling it off. Yeah, and he's going to have almost 40% equity. So even if he check min raises here, he would be able to call it off versus a jam. But let's see what his stack size looks like if he does something like check raise like 2.5x here. So I bet 22. He's got 192 left. So 2.5x would make it like 54, 55. So he'd make it $55. So 192 minus 55 equals 137. All right, so he'd have 137 left in his stack, and there'd be 55 plus 55 plus 37. Oh my gosh, yeah, it would be perfect. He could even check raise to like 65 or yeah, he could check raise to almost like $65 here and then still have a river shove that has fold equity. And so I think for him, that's a significantly better play, is to check raise to 65, and if I don't fold, he can then potentially shove the river. And if I do fold, awesome. And if I jam it in, he obviously can call. So yeah, I think check raising for him to a more normal size of 2.5 to 3x plays out much, much better for him on potential river situations. And if he's going to check raise to this size, I almost think just shoving is better. Yeah, just because like when he check raises this size, you have to remember he has 5 high, and if I ever spaz shove over the top with like the 7-5, right? If I just have 7-5 of hearts, and then I like decide he's full of crap on the turn or something, and then I spaz shove it in with 7 high, he's made a massive mistake. Whereas like I can never call with 7-5 off. I can never like call a jam with 7-5, but I can potentially shove it in over this size. Okay, so yeah, that's it. I hope that this was kind of a cool hand for people. I didn't have a huge plan coming into the video. I just thought it was a neat hand, and I want to talk about it. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks, guys.